Sarah Martinez had been working at the Whitmore military base for 3 years as a civilian contractor in the communications department. At 28, she was one of the youngest technical specialists on the base, responsible for maintaining the complex radio and satellite systems that kept the facility connected to the outside world. Her small frame and quiet demeanor often made others underestimate her. But Sarah's work was critical to base operations. The trouble started on a rainy Tuesday morning in November. Sarah had discovered something troubling while running routine maintenance checks on the communications servers. Deep in the encrypted files, she found evidence of unauthorized data transfers happening during off hours. Someone was accessing classified information and sending it to external servers. The timestamps showed these transfers had been happening for months. Sarah knew she had to report this immediately. She gathered the evidence carefully, printing out logs and copying files to a secure drive. Her hands shook slightly as she realized the magnitude of what she had found. This wasn't just a minor security breach. This was potential espionage happening right under everyone's nose. She decided to take her findings to Colonel Roberts, the base security chief. Sarah had worked with him before and trusted his judgment. As she walked through the corridors toward the administrative building, she noticed how unusually quiet the base seemed that morning. Most personnel were either in training exercises or attending briefings, leaving the hallways nearly empty. The administrative building housed the offices of senior staff and security personnel. Sarah climbed the stairs to the second floor, where Colonel Roberts' office was located. The stairwell was dimly lit, with only every other fluorescent bulb working properly. Her footsteps echoed in the empty space as she reached the landing. Just as Sarah turned toward the colonel's office, she heard footsteps behind her. She glanced back and saw 3 figures in military fatigues approaching. She recognized them as Sergeant Hayes, Corporal Wilson, and Private Jackson from the security detail. Something about their expressions made her uncomfortable, but she couldn't quite place what it was. "Miss Martinez," Sergeant Hayes called out, his voice carrying an edge she had never heard before. "We need to talk to you." Sarah stopped and turned to face them, clutching the folder containing her evidence a little tighter. "I'm actually on my way to see Colonel Roberts about something important. Can this wait?" "No, it can't wait," Corporal Wilson said, stepping closer. His usual friendly demeanor was nowhere to be found. "We know what you've been doing." A chill ran down Sarah's spine. "What are you talking about?" "The files, Sarah," Private Jackson said quietly. "We know you've been digging where you shouldn't be digging." Sarah's mind raced. How did they know about her discovery? She had been careful to work alone and hadn't told anyone about what she had found. Unless they were somehow involved in what she had discovered. "I don't know what you're implying," Sarah said, trying to keep her voice steady. "But I need to get to Colonel Roberts' office right now." She turned to continue down the hallway, but Sergeant Hayes grabbed her arm. "You're not going anywhere, Sarah. You've seen too much." The realization hit her like a physical blow. These 3 men were part of the security breach she had discovered. They were the ones stealing classified information, and now they knew she had evidence against them. Sarah's training in self-defense kicked in, and she tried to pull away from Hayes' grip. "Let go of me," she demanded, raising her voice in hopes that someone might hear. But the building was empty except for them. Wilson moved to block her path to Colonel Roberts' office, while Jackson positioned himself between her and the stairs leading down. They had effectively trapped her. "Give us the files, Sarah," Hayes said, tightening his grip on her arm. "Hand over everything you copied, and maybe we can work something out." "I don't know what you're talking about," Sarah said, though her shaking voice betrayed her fear. Wilson stepped forward and roughly grabbed the folder from her hands. As he flipped through the contents, his face darkened. "She's got everything. The transfer logs, the server access records, even the external IP addresses." Sarah knew she was in serious danger. These men had been stealing military secrets for who knows how long, and now she was the only thing standing between them and exposure. She had to get away and find help. "Look," she said, trying to sound calm. "I haven't shown this to anyone yet. We can figure something out that works for everyone. But even as she said the words, she knew there was no negotiating with them. The evidence was too damning, and they couldn't risk her talking to anyone in authority. Hayes leaned closer to her, his breath hot against her face. You should have minded your own business, Sarah. This is way bigger than you understand. What's bigger? She asked, genuinely confused. What are you talking about? Jackson laughed bitterly. You think this is just us three acting on our own? You have no idea how deep this goes. The implication of his words terrified Sarah even more. If this conspiracy involved more people than just these three soldiers, then who could she trust? How many others on the base were involved in selling military secrets? Please, she whispered. Just let me go. I won't say anything to anyone. It's too late for that, Wilson said coldly. You've already seen too much. Hayes released her arm, but moved closer, backing her toward the top of the stairs. Sarah realized with growing horror what they were planning to do. They were going to make it look like an accident. No, she said more firmly, finding her voice. I won't let you get away with this. She tried to run toward Colonel Roberts's office, but Wilson caught her easily. In the struggle that followed, Sarah fought desperately to break free. She managed to land a solid kick to Jackson's shin, causing him to yelp in pain. But Hayes quickly overpowered her. Hold her still, Hayes commanded Wilson. Sarah continued to struggle, but Wilson's grip was too strong. She watched in terror as Hayes and Jackson exchanged a meaningful look. They had made their decision. Make it look convincing, Hayes told Jackson quietly, though Sarah could still hear every word. What happened next occurred in slow motion for Sarah. Jackson moved behind her, while Wilson held her arms. Hayes positioned himself at her side, ready to give the final push. Sarah realized this was her last chance to fight back. With all her strength, she threw her head back, catching Wilson in the nose. Blood spurted as he released her with a curse. But before she could take advantage of her momentary freedom, Hayes shoved her hard toward the staircase. Sarah felt herself falling backward, her arms windmilling frantically as she tried to regain her balance. The last thing she remembered was the sickening sensation of tumbling down the concrete stairs, her body bouncing off each step as she fell toward the landing below. When Sarah hit the bottom of the staircase, the impact knocked her unconscious immediately. Her body lay twisted and motionless on the cold concrete floor, blood pooling around her head from where it had struck the edge of a step. The folder containing all her evidence lay scattered nearby, its contents strewn across the landing like fallen leaves. The three soldiers stood at the top of the stairs, looking down at Sarah's still form. For a moment, none of them spoke. The reality of what they had just done was sinking in. Is she? Jackson started to ask, but couldn't finish the question. Hayes was already pulling out his radio. Base Emergency Services. This is Sergeant Hayes. We have a civilian down in the administrative building stairwell. Appears to be a fall. Need medical response immediately. His voice was perfectly calm and professional, showing no sign of the violence that had just occurred. As they waited for the emergency responders to arrive, Hayes quickly gathered up Sarah's scattered papers and tucked them inside his jacket. Remember, he told Wilson and Jackson quietly, we were walking by and heard her fall. We came to investigate and found her like this. We don't know anything about any files or investigation. Within minutes, the building filled with the sound of running footsteps and urgent voices. The base medical team arrived first, followed closely by military police and senior officers who had been alerted to the incident. As the medics worked to stabilize Sarah's unconscious form, Colonel Roberts himself arrived at the scene. Hayes, Wilson, and Jackson stood nearby, playing their roles as concerned witnesses who had simply discovered the victim. But unknown to them, Sarah's investigation had been more thorough than they realized, and her fall down those stairs was about to set in motion events that would expose not just their small conspiracy, but a much larger network of corruption that reached the highest levels of the base command. The base hospital's intensive care unit was unusually quiet that evening when Sarah Martinez slowly regained consciousness. Her head throbbed with an intensity that made opening her eyes feel like staring directly into the sun. Bandages covered much of her face, and her left arm was immobilized in a cast. Every breath sent sharp pains through her ribs. Dr. Emily Chen, the base's chief medical officer, was checking Sarah's charts when she noticed her patient's eyes flutter open. Dr. Chen had been troubled by Sarah's injuries from the moment she arrived. While the official report claimed she had fallen down the stairs, the pattern of her wounds suggested something more sinister. "Sarah?" Dr. Chen said softly, moving closer to the bed. "Can you hear me? You're in the hospital. You've been unconscious for nearly 18 hours. Sarah tried to speak, but only a whisper emerged. "What happened?" "You fell down the stairs in the administrative building, doctor," Chen explained, though her tone suggested she had doubts about this explanation. "Do you remember anything about what led to the fall?" "Then stands. Well, the lunces, they said, what in separating persides." Slowly, fragments of memory began returning to Sarah. The files she had discovered, the 3 soldiers confronting her, the terrifying realization that they were involved in the security breach, and then the violent push that sent her tumbling down the concrete steps. "They pushed me," Sarah whispered, her eyes filling with tears. "Hayes, Wilson, and Jackson. They pushed me down the stairs." Dr. Chen leaned closer, her expression growing serious. "Sarah, this is very important. Are you certain about what you're saying?" Before Sarah could respond, the door to her room opened, and Colonel Roberts entered, followed by the same 3 soldiers who had attacked her. Sarah's heart rate monitor immediately began beeping frantically as panic set in. "Ms. Martinez," Colonel Roberts said in his official voice, "I'm glad to see you're awake. These gentlemen found you after your accident and called for help. They probably saved your life." Sarah stared at Hayes, Wilson, and Jackson in disbelief. They stood there, with concerned expressions, playing the role of heroes rather than the criminals they actually were. Hayes even had the audacity to ask how she was feeling. "They didn't save me," Sarah said, her voice gaining strength. "They're the ones who pushed me down the stairs. They're stealing classified information from the base servers." Colonel Roberts frowned. "Miss Martinez, I understand you've suffered a serious head injury. Confusion and false memories are common with this type of trauma. These men found you and immediately called for help." "I'm not confused," Sarah insisted, trying to sit up despite the pain. "Check my office computer. I have evidence of unauthorized data transfers. These 3 are involved in espionage." Dr. Chen had been watching this exchange with growing concern. She had noticed that Sarah's supposed rescuers seemed more interested in what she might remember than in her actual well-being. Their body language suggested anxiety rather than relief at her recovery. "Colonel," Dr. Chen interjected, "perhaps we should let Miss Martinez rest. She needs time to recover from her injuries." "Of course," Colonel Roberts agreed, but his tone was cold. "Miss Martinez, we'll discuss your accusations when you're feeling better. For now, please focus on getting well." After the men left, Dr. Chen remained in the room. She moved closer to Sarah's bed and spoke in a low voice. "Sarah, I need you to listen carefully. Your injuries are inconsistent with a simple fall downstairs. You have defensive wounds on your hands and arms, suggesting you tried to fight someone off. I believe what you're telling me." "Not." Sarah felt a wave of relief that someone finally believed her, but Dr. Chen's next words chilled her to the bone. "However," Dr. Chen continued, "you need to be very careful about who you trust. If these men are really involved in espionage, they won't hesitate to silence you permanently. And if Colonel Roberts dismissed your accusations so quickly, he might be involved too." That night, while Sarah lay awake wrestling with pain and fear, Dr. Chen made a decision that would change everything. She had a secure line in her office that connected directly to the Pentagon's Medical Oversight Division. It was a channel she had never used before, but she knew this situation was beyond the scope of normal base politics. Dr. Chen placed her call at 0200 hours, when she knew most of the base would be asleep. She spoke to a duty officer at the Pentagon, who immediately transferred her to General Patricia Morrison, a two-star general responsible for medical and personnel security across all military installations. General Morrison, Dr. Chen said after introducing herself, I have a situation at Whitmore Base that requires immediate attention. I believe we have a civilian contractor who was deliberately harmed to prevent her from reporting espionage activities. General Morrison's response was immediate and decisive. Doctor, I need you to document everything. The victim's injuries, her statements, and the official reports. Send them through secure channels within the hour. And, Doctor, keep this conversation completely confidential. Don't discuss it with anyone on your base, regardless of their rank. Meanwhile, in another part of the country, General Morrison immediately contacted her colleague, General Robert Hayes, no relation to Sergeant Hayes, a three-star general who specialized in counterintelligence operations. The two generals had worked together for over a decade and trusted each other implicitly. Bob, General Morrison said over their secure line, I think we have a major security breach at Whitmore Base. A civilian contractor may have uncovered an espionage ring, and it appears there was an attempt to eliminate her. General Hayes was known for his methodical approach to investigations. But this situation demanded swift action. Pat, if there's an active espionage operation and they're willing to commit violence to protect it, we can't wait for a standard investigation. We need to move fast. What are you thinking? General Morrison asked. Complete lockdown. Nobody gets on or off that base until we know exactly what's happening. If there are foreign agents or compromised personnel, we can't let them escape or destroy evidence. General Morrison agreed. I'll handle the medical side and ensure the contractor's safety. You coordinate the security response. Within 2 hours, both generals had mobilized their respective teams. General Morrison dispatched a specialized medical team with security clearances to evacuate Sarah Martinez to a secure military hospital off base. General Hayes began assembling a counterintelligence unit that would take control of Whitmore Base without warning. As dawn broke over Whitmore Base, Sarah was surprised to see Dr. Chen enter her room with two unfamiliar military personnel wearing medical insignia she didn't recognize. Sarah, Dr. Chen said quietly, these officers are here to transfer you to a more secure location. General Morrison at the Pentagon has taken personal interest in your case. Sarah was carefully moved to a specially equipped medical transport vehicle. As they drove away from the base, she could see unusual activity in her rearview mirror. Additional military vehicles were arriving, and she noticed helicopters circling overhead. At the same time, Colonel Roberts was having his morning coffee when his aide burst into his office. Sir, we have incoming aircraft requesting permission to land. They're carrying Pentagon authorization codes I've never seen before. Colonel Roberts felt a knot forming in his stomach. He had hoped Sarah's accusations would be dismissed as the ravings of someone with a head injury. But if the Pentagon was sending investigators, it meant someone was taking her claims seriously. Who's commanding the incoming unit? He asked. According to the manifest, it's a joint operation led by Generals Morrison and Hayes, sir. They're requesting immediate cooperation with a counterintelligence investigation. Colonel Roberts knew that his career, and possibly his freedom, was now in jeopardy. He had been aware of the unauthorized data transfers for months, but had been paid handsomely to look the other way. What had started as a simple arrangement to supplement his retirement fund had grown into something much larger and more dangerous. He reached for his secure phone to call his contact, a man he knew only as Marcus, who had first approached him about providing access to certain classified files. But when he dialed the number, he got only a disconnected message. Meanwhile, Sergeants Hayes, Wilson, and Jackson were conducting what they thought was routine morning training when their commanding officer suddenly ordered them to report to the main administration building immediately. They had no idea that their names were already on a list of suspected personnel that would soon be in the hands of Pentagon investigators. The trap was closing, but the full scope of what Sarah had uncovered was only beginning to be understood. Her painful tumble down those stairs had set in motion a chain of events that would expose not just a small group of corrupt soldiers, but an international espionage network that had been operating for years under the noses of base security. As the Pentagon team prepared to land at Whitmore Base, both generals knew they had only hours to secure evidence and apprehend suspects before word of the investigation leaked to other members of the conspiracy. The next few hours would determine whether Sarah's courage in reporting what she had discovered would lead to justice, or whether the conspiracy was too deep and well protected to be stopped. At exactly 0800 hours on Wednesday morning, 3 black helicopters appeared on the horizon, approaching Whitmore Military Base. The duty officer in the control tower received a transmission unlike any he had heard in his 15 years of service. Whitmore Base, this is Pentagon Authority 77 Alpha. We are assuming immediate operational control of your facility under Emergency Protocol, Omega. All base personnel are to remain at their current positions until further notice. Colonel Roberts stood at his office window, watching the helicopters land on the main parade ground. His hands trembled slightly, as he realized that his carefully constructed world was about to collapse. He had tried calling Marcus again, but the line remained disconnected. His foreign handler had vanished, leaving him to face the consequences alone. General Patricia Morrison stepped off the lead helicopter, followed by General Robert Hayes and a team of 30 highly trained investigators and security personnel. Both generals wore expressions of grim determination as they surveyed the base that was about to be turned inside out. Remember, General Hayes told his team as they gathered near the helicopters, we have reason to believe this conspiracy includes base command staff. Trust no one currently assigned to this facility until we've had time to properly vet them. The base's senior staff had assembled in the main conference room as requested, but they were unprepared for what happened next. Instead of a briefing or consultation, they found themselves facing a room full of Pentagon investigators who immediately began separating them for individual questioning. Colonel Roberts tried to maintain his composure as he was escorted to a private office by 2 stern-faced agents. Gentlemen, I'm not sure what this is about, but I demand to know the nature of these allegations. Colonel, the lead investigator said calmly, we have evidence of systematic theft of classified materials from your base servers. We also have testimony suggesting that a civilian contractor was violently attacked to prevent her from reporting these activities. 20 miles away, in a secure military medical facility, Sarah Martinez was providing detailed testimony to General Morrison and a team of specialists. Her memory of the attack had become clearer as the effects of her concussion diminished, and she was able to provide specific details about the conversation she had overheard between her attackers. They said it was bigger than just the 3 of them, Sarah explained, her voice steady despite the pain medication. Jackson specifically mentioned that I had no idea how deep it went, and Hayes acted like he was taking orders from someone with more authority. General Morrison nodded grimly. Sarah, your discovery and your courage in reporting it may have uncovered one of the most significant security breaches we've seen in years. The files you found show unauthorized transfers of satellite reconnaissance data, troop movement schedules, and weapons system specifications. Back at Whitmore Base, the investigation was proceeding with military efficiency. General Hayes had ordered complete electronic isolation of the facility, all internet connections severed, all external communications monitored, and all personnel confined to base until the investigation was complete. Sergeant Hayes, Corporal Wilson, and Private Jackson were among the first to be detained for questioning. They had been taken into custody while conducting what they thought was routine morning PT, completely unaware that their names were already known to the investigators. In separate interrogation rooms, the 3 men initially stuck to their story about finding Sarah after an accidental fall. But when confronted with evidence from the server logs Sarah had discovered, their stories began to fall apart. Wilson broke first. The young corporal had never been involved in anything more serious than the occasional bar fight, and the reality of facing espionage charges terrified him. When investigators showed him evidence that the classified files had been accessed using his login credentials, he realized he needed to cooperate to avoid spending the rest of his life in prison. It started about 8 months ago, Wilson confessed, his voice barely above a whisper. Marcus approached me when I was off base. He said he worked for a defense contractor and just needed routine maintenance schedules and personnel information. Nothing classified, he promised. But it escalated? The investigator prompted. Yeah. Once I started providing information, he had leverage over me. He threatened to report me unless I gave him access to more sensitive files. Hayes and Jackson were brought in the same way. We were all scared and in too deep to get out. While Wilson was revealing the basic structure of the operation, investigators were making an even more disturbing discovery in Colonel Roberts's office. Hidden behind a false panel in his desk, they found documents proving that the conspiracy reached far beyond 3 enlisted men. The papers revealed a sophisticated network involving military personnel from at least 4 different bases, defense contractors, and what appeared to be foreign intelligence operatives. Colonel Roberts hadn't just looked the other way. He had been actively facilitating the operation in exchange for substantial payments to offshore accounts. When confronted with this evidence, Colonel Roberts finally understood that his situation was hopeless. I want to make a deal, he told the investigators. I'll tell you everything I know. But I want protection. These people don't leave loose ends. His confession revealed the staggering scope of what Sarah had accidentally uncovered. The espionage network had been operating for nearly 3 years, systematically harvesting classified information from multiple military installations. The money involved was enormous. Marcus had paid over $2 million to various military personnel for their cooperation. But the most shocking revelation came when Colonel Roberts identified Marcus. His real name is Viktor Petrov, he admitted. He works for a technology company that has contracts with the Defense Department, but he's actually a Russian intelligence officer. He told me they had people placed in companies throughout the defense industry. General Hayes immediately contacted the FBI and CIA with this information. Within hours, a joint task force was mobilizing to identify and apprehend other members of the network before they could flee the country or destroy evidence. Meanwhile, the base lockdown was revealing additional evidence that investigators hadn't expected to find. A search of the communications building where Sarah had worked uncovered a sophisticated piece of hardware that had been secretly installed to intercept and copy all data flowing through the base's servers. The device was so well hidden that it would never have been discovered during routine maintenance. Only Sarah's careful examination of the server logs had revealed the unauthorized transfers that led to its discovery. Dr. Chen, who had remained on base to assist with medical evaluations of detained personnel, was amazed by the scope of what had been uncovered. If Sarah hadn't been so thorough in her work, and if she hadn't been brave enough to report what she found despite the danger, this could have continued for years. As the investigation entered its 3rd day, the full impact of Sarah's discovery was becoming clear. The classified information, stolen from Whitmore Base and other facilities, had provided foreign intelligence services with detailed knowledge of U.S. military capabilities, troop deployments, and strategic planning. National security officials estimated that the breach had compromised dozens of ongoing operations and would require years to fully assess and counter. The financial cost of replacing compromised systems and relocating exposed personnel was projected to exceed $50 million. But perhaps more importantly, the investigation had revealed vulnerabilities in base security procedures that allowed such an extensive operation to go undetected for so long. General Morrison was already working on recommendations for new protocols that would prevent similar breaches in the future. The 3 enlisted men who had attacked Sarah were facing charges that would likely result in life sentences. Their decision to use violence rather than simply denying her accusations had escalated the situation from espionage to attempted murder, ensuring they would face the harshest possible penalties. Colonel Roberts, despite his cooperation, was also facing serious prison time. His rank and position of trust made his betrayal particularly egregious in the eyes of military justice. However, his information was proving valuable in tracking down other members of the network. Viktor Petrov, the Russian operative who had orchestrated much of the conspiracy, had fled the country within hours of learning about the investigation. But international intelligence agencies were now working together to track him down and determine how many other operations he might have been running. 2 weeks after the base shutdown began, Sarah Martinez was finally cleared to return to light duty. Her physical injuries had healed well, but the psychological impact of the attack and the knowledge that her discovery had exposed such a massive conspiracy would take longer to overcome. General Morrison visited Sarah personally to commend her courage and thoroughness. Your dedication to your job and your willingness to report suspicious activity, even when it put you in danger, has potentially saved countless lives and protected national security interests around the world. Sarah was offered a promotion and transferred to a prestigious position at the Pentagon, recognition of her valuable contribution to national security. But she also knew that her life would never be the same. She had proven that one person, doing their job with integrity and courage, could make a difference even against powerful and dangerous adversaries. The Whitmore base shutdown officially ended after 18 days, but the investigation it launched continued for months. The case became a textbook example of how seemingly small security breaches could mask much larger threats, and how the courage of one individual could expose conspiracies that might otherwise have remained hidden indefinitely. Sarah's fall down those stairs had indeed changed everything, but not in the way her attackers had intended. Instead of silencing her, their violence had drawn attention to crimes that might never have been discovered, ultimately leading to the dismantling of an extensive espionage network and the strengthening of security procedures across the entire military.